Thanks for coming, everybody, and thanks to Hannah. These evenings are really enjoyable. I've attended a few now, and she's tremendous the way she organises them, so huge appreciation to her. So I'll talk about my book and why I wrote it, really, which is that I've always been curious about St Andrews and just what makes the place tick. Lots of things have been written about the Royal and Ancient and the Old Course. But I was curious really about the place and the town and what it is that makes it particularly special. And when I started looking at it, I started looking at slightly different social groupings in the town to see what they brought to the place and the golf. So in the book, I'm really looking at St Andrews through the prism of golf, but looking at different groupings within the town. So history comes in lots of different forms. I think the way to think about what I've done here or tried to do is write social history about St Andrews. And social history is really the study of different groups within society, and generally those which have been slightly underrepresented by normal writing of history. So within the book, I try and look at things like the university, so particularly the contribution of students, the community, and particularly the contribution of town residents, artisans and working class people from humble backgrounds, and women and what they've brought to St Andrews. So it's a bit of a compilation of looking at those individuals and groupings and trying to make sense of what's really quite a complex, interesting society in this tiny little town that just has some lovely golf courses. So that's the background to the book. I'll try and explain some of the content. Oh yeah, so yeah, one of the quotes I came across early on was Jeff Ogilvy, who was the US Open winner in 2006, and he wrote the following quote: I fell in love with the town before I fell in love with the golf course. At other great golf courses in the world, they might have a nice clubhouse and then you leave. Here at St Andrews, it's the town first and then the course. You leave this course and then you walk straight into this magical place. So it's a really interesting quotation because he's talking about town and place, and for him it was clearly extremely interesting, but he doesn't really define what he means by town and place. So within the book, I've tried my best to do that. So Camelot is the title, and the first line on this slide is really a classic dictionary definition of what Camelot represents. So a place of idealized beauty, peacefulness and enlightenment. And then the second one, the abode of noble King Arthur and his chivalrous knights. I'm not entirely sure why I came up with the word Camelot, but I've got a feeling subconsciously it maybe links with the Holy Grail, and in quite a lot of golf literature, the claret jug is described as the Holy Grail of golf. And I just wonder in my own subconsciousness if that embedded itself in my head, and then that became a sensible title. And then I justified the title by how I thought about St Andrews. So if we think about St Andrews, it's clearly, it is a little enclave at the edge of nowhere, and I think most of us would say it is very beautiful. It might not always be peaceful given the student component, but it is enlightened, and it's clearly a very attractive environment. I would argue there are some heroic individuals we can link with Camelot. So Hugh Lyon Playfair built the castle opposite, which is the Royal and Ancient Clubhouse. So he can deserve some credit for that. And I tend to think of old Tom Morris as almost a Merlin character who could do anything, anywhere, and talk to anybody about anything, from princes to paupers, from artisans to artists. So he was a remarkable individual, and you can take the analogy on a little bit if you work quite hard at it without pushing too many silly buttons. I think there is a purposeful community at St Andrews, and I write about that in the book, that it's only because golf stayed here with all the challenges and pressures on it in the latter part of the 19th century, because the community really worked together to make that happen. And I don't think that's often well understood. And then the last point's a little bit airy-fairy, but I think there is something in the air here, and I don't just mean a very cold east wind that makes us all shiver. But I went to Iona maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and I had a sense that Iona had something just special about it. And I think there is something special about St Andrews, which is more than just a nice place to be. And I think it's to do with the history, I think it's to do with the paintings, the poetry and the photography, and just everything that brings memories to people in different ways. And now whether that's spiritual or soul, I don't know. But anyway, that's the connection in the book with Camelot, which I hope makes some sort of sense. This is the very famous railway poster, which everybody will have seen from 1927. And what I like about this, apart from the fact it's in the gift shop in St Andrews on Market Street as a cushion cover, it's so popular, is that it says quite a lot about the book. So I think the overall image is one of a very happy place, attractive people enjoying themselves. So I like that. In the background, you've got the history of the old town. In the mid-ground, you've got some people bathing and on the beach and enjoying themselves. And the Grand Hotel, obviously the holidaymakers. And then you've got golfers in the foreground. And this picture doesn't capture it quite properly, but the two women really the most prominent in the poster. So it's highlighting the role of women. So it actually picks up quite a lot of themes in the book. But what's really quite interesting is this is a poster from 1927, but it's really in a long line of imagery that was established during the 19th century, which started with painters like Lees and went to Wardlow and Spindler. And then the photographers like Thomas Roger, who photographed St Andrews extensively, who were creating these images throughout the 19th century. And all this was really doing in 1927 was building on that type of imagery that had been established at that point. But the interesting thing is St Andrews was the poster child of the railways in the 1920s and 30s, so it was seen as the most instantly recognisable long-distance venue for travellers on the railway lines. If we've got time at the end, I've also got some paintings from Monet, which he did in the 1880s from the Normandy coastline, which I'll just show you because it's, I wouldn't say there's a copy of Monet, but the similarities are very similar. So it's a very high quality image, I would say, in painting, but it does draw heavily on the French Impressionists. So in terms of the university, I think St Andrews is completely unique as being a major golf destination with a university at its heart. And the university brings lots of things to the town. So on the right, we've got a photograph of a book which John Stewart kindly supplied. He's at the back of the room. Charlie Sifford was given an honorary degree in 2006 by the university. And he was the first black player on the PGA Tour. And as a result of him appearing in, I think it was 1961, the white-only Caucasian clause was dropped. Somebody's nodding, so got my dates right. And I think the point of showing this is that the university brings a modern-day dimension to golf, which brings it into frames of reference that people can understand today in terms of social issues. And that clearly is very different from any other major golfing destination you can think of. Clearly, Jack Nicklaus is one of the great ambassadors here, and he was made an honorary citizen last year. But I think the interesting thing about that was it was the town clubs, the R&A, the university, and the community council all working together to actually make that happen. So this is the sense of community, I think, which is very prevalent here. Bottom left, we have Arnold Palmer, again, who's been one of the great, I think, supporters of St Andrews. And again, the university establishes quite long-lasting links with some of these golfers by giving them honorary degrees. So he got his honorary degree in 2010, but then he established a golfing scholarship linked to the university in 2013. And various of the golfing students who play for the Saints Golf Club have been to his course at Bay Hill in Florida. So it's the university that creates these ongoing links and connections, which is very unusual. One of my favourite photographs in the book is this one, and this chap here is Robert Barclay, who is one of the, he was a very keen student golfer, and he became one of the golfing reverends who, I think David took golf to Greenock? Is that where he, Greenock? Yeah. So he wrote extensively about golf. I think he was the first person to really coin the phrase "the home of golf" in an essay he wrote in 1892. And home of golf didn't really become a standard phrase until about the 1970s, when the Links Trust took it up. But he wrote wonderful prose, and in his essay called "The Home of Golf," which was very short, it's maybe 1,000 words, he wrote, "Golf without St Andrews would be almost as intolerable as St Andrews without golf. In short, St Andrews is the home and nursery of golf. The very air seems to be impregnated with the game." So he wrote lovely prose, and he's trying to capture this spiritual aspect in his writing, and he's definitely one of the heroes in the book in terms of I think establishing St Andrews' reputation in a really quite unusual way at the end of the 19th century. He became a ordained minister in the church, and he did preach occasionally at the churches in St Andrews. And as you all know, you can't play golf on the old course on a Sunday. And allegedly, old Tom Morris came up to him after one of his sermons on a Sunday and said, "You'll have missed no short putts today, Mr. Barclay," which is a sort of a nice quote. He died in his early 30s having a dental extraction under anaesthetic. So he came to a rather sad young end. But so that's a little bit about the university. Royalty and St Andrews is long and well established, and hadn't really appreciated the depths of the links before I started doing the book and researching the book. And superficially, the royal link's very helpful. There's royal kings and queens and princes, princesses who've been captains and patrons and members of the club. But scratch the surface a bit, and the royal connection's a little bit sort of more complicated than you'd imagine. So in 1834, King William was asked to grant royal status to the club and initially refused and agreed under pressure. He donated a medal in 1837, but unfortunately misspelt the word St Andrews. He missed off the S. Then Prince Edward in the early 1860s was asked if he would like to be patron of the club, and he wrote back saying he'd be happy to be captain. So they made him captain, but then he actually never visited St Andrews to perform any of his captain's duties in the year he was captain. Then in the middle we've got that's the Prince Edward of Wales, who was captain in 1922, became King George VIII, and abdicated in 1936 under a couple of clouds, one with his marriage, and then secondly with his behaviour, some alleged behaviour during the Second World War. So he was a captain who actually again had a slightly clouded history, as did Princess Anne's brother, of course. One of the real royal heroes is the funny-looking chap on the right, which is Prince Leopold, and he was captain in 1876. Queen Victoria's youngest son, youngest of 8 children, and he performed all his duties magnificently. And when he visited, apparently, there was a huge procession all the way from Edinburgh to St Andrews, with crowds turning out all the way for his captain's inauguration. And he was an outstanding captain, though I'm not sure he could actually play golf if you look at how he's holding the club. So that's the royal connection, which is sort of, it's deep and very wide-ranging, but quite mixed once you start, I think, scratching away at the detail of it. These are some of the artisans or the working class people who've made a big impact on golf. So Peter Anderson on the right, he won the UK Amateur at Prestwick in 1891 as a student, undergraduate at the university. But his big impression really on golf was the work he did in Australia. So he did a lot of work building and creating golf around Melbourne and Perth, and had a huge impact on Australian golf. The chap bottom left, this just see if there's this chap, James Foulis Jr. He won the US Open in 1896, another artisan. But again, his family were very, very influential, building courses all over the Midwest, particularly around Chicago, as were the Forgan family as well, who aren't featured here. And then top left, we've got Bobby Jones in 1930. And the chap on his right-hand side is called Finley Small Douglas. He was a Madras college boy at university, but he became quite a famous amateur golfer in the States and was president of the United States Golf Association in 1930 when Jones won the Grand Slam. So he was seen as very much somebody who embodied St Andrews and how he played with, apparently had rollback cuffs which were buttoned down, specially made. And he carried 8 golf clubs in his little carry bag. And he got the Bob Jones Award for sportsmanship in, I think, 1959, which was a great honour for anybody to receive that. So there were some of the artisan influence, and my contention in the book would be that it was the artisans or working class golfers who were probably more influential taking golf, particularly to America and Australia, than some of the more gentlemanly members of the Royal and Ancient.
Anderson, we found out, it was only a couple of weeks, Anderson is the one that features in that great photograph. Tom Morris and Tom Anderson with Tom drinking his glass of ginger beer on the 14th.
Is that right? Yes. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. I'm not sure I'd seen that, but yeah. He's a very interesting character. Again, he was a qualified. He did divinity, became ordained as a minister, but actually didn't practice as a minister in Australia. He was a teacher, became a head teacher, and I think he got an OBE ultimately for his services to education. Women, very important, and the painting on the right is quite well known, which is the Thomas Hodge painting from 1870, and the sort of fascinating thing about this is really the town in the background and the women in the foreground, and you can see that there's a man to the right of the women. They're wearing quite extravagant clothing, and the reason there was a man there, he had 2 roles at that time. One was to keep score, and the second was to pick the golf balls out of the hole on the Himalayas, or the Ladies Green as it was called at the time. So what we've got here is, this is the current Himalayas basically, which old Tom Morris built for the women, or the ladies course. And the point about women shaping the overall feel of St Andrews is that bottom left, that's Roussac Sitel from about 1890. So so before the Grand Hotel was built. And it looks slightly out of scale, but it certainly looks imposing. And the point about women, which is something David Hamilton has written about, is that lots of women came to St Andrews on holiday with families. So it was not just men coming here to play golf, it was women with their families who also played golf. So from a very early date, this is 1890, women were welcomed here. And of course the Jubilee course, when it was built in 1897, was partly to accommodate women and children in particular. So one contention would be that the reason St Andrews is such a sort of happy, open, enjoyable communal place is because women have been involved really from the very earliest days and have been welcome here to come and play golf. And then top left, we've got two members of the Royal and Ancient. So on the left, we have Renee Powell, who was made a member in 2015. And on the right is Dame Professor Sally Mapstone, who became an honorary member in 2017. And you may remember there's a bit of a fracas with Professor Vice-Chancellor Louise Richardson when she wasn't offered membership of the Royal and Ancient. But happily that's all, I think, put behind the membership of the club. And in some ways it was a bit of a distraction, I think, in terms of that particular debate, because women have always had access to their own clubs here, as a number of you will know. And the St Rule was established very much initially as a social club with the backing of the Royal and Ancient, and then developed a golf section within it, I think from 1897. And that was quite, I think, typical of the way women did have their own clubs and access to St Andrews. So, this is really just, I was talking about the link with Monet and the railway poster. So this is from the Normandy coast in the early 1880s. And I think it's a place called Trouville in the top right. But the point I wanted to make really was just the colours of the sea and the way the coastline runs. And even in the top right, the way Monet's picked up the buildings and the people in the foreground enjoying themselves. That's very much the sort of imagery and colours and ideas that Gawthorne was using in his 1927 poster. So I'll stop there, but I think what I wanted to say is that we've got a very interesting mixed society in St Andrews, which is comprised of these different social groupings. And that there might just be something spiritual or soulful in the air when you bring it all together. So I'll stop there. Okay.